Thank you for joining me today. I want to share a phrase with you that is used in the Bible 4 times. And it's the phrase where God says, "Never will I leave you and never will I forsake you." The first time this phrase is used is in Deuteronomy chapter 31 verse 6, where God speaks to the people of Israel through Moses and says to them, "Never will I leave you and never will I forsake you." Moses was about to leave this earth. He was about to die. And under the leadership of Joshua, the people were soon to cross into the promised land. And so God had given the people that word of encouragement. "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." Then Moses spoke that word to Joshua and said the same thing, that God will never leave you nor forsake you. And he encouraged him not to be terrified or frightened of stepping out in faith to do that which God had called him to do. And then the third time this phrase is used in the scripture is when God spoke it directly to Joshua. And he says, "As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for I will never leave you and never forsake you." And then the fourth and final time this phrase is used in the scripture is when the author to the Hebrews wrote it to the Christians of the early church. And by writing it to them, he wrote it to all Christians of all ages. And I'm going to read it to you. "Because God has said, 'Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you.' So we say with confidence, 'The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me?'" That second part of the phrase is a quote from Psalm 118 verse 6 about God being our helper. And so I want to say this to encourage you just with 4 things with this phrase. Firstly, when you respond to God's call, do not be afraid to step out. His presence is always with you. To understand this phrase, you can have a married couple. They could have been married for however long you like. And sometimes they may not have left each other physically, but sometimes in that relationship, they forsake each other. They no longer have an interest in the other person's welfare or their well-being. When God says, "I will never leave you and forsake you," he's saying that his presence will always be with you, and he will always have an interest in the things that concern you. That he's always looking out for your welfare, for your well-being, for his promises to be fulfilled in your life. So when you respond to his call, and when you do his work, and when you step out in faith to do those things that he's called you to do, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid of the spiritual evil powers that exist in this world. Do not be afraid of the tyranny of people who will try to silence you or to oppress you, or those who wish to discredit you, or those who will try to undermine you. Do not be afraid financially, because in the letter to Hebrews, that was the context that the writer was saying about, in the context of finances, that God will never leave us and forsake us. So we see that in all areas of life, when we're called of God, which every Christian is, when we respond to his call and we do his work and we step out in faith, he will always be with us, and he will always provide for us financially and everything we need. So my fellow Christian, do not be afraid, for God will never leave you and God will never forsake you. So like the author of the letter to Hebrews, say with confidence, "The Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me?" And God bless his word to you. Amen.